Where we're going, we don't need knock sensors.
Well, it'll be in limp mode, that's for sure.
So while we were trying to get the car started, we had a couple aha moments. One being one of the main ECM relays was tucked up away in the wrong spot, and that was because we had the harness orientated wrong because we had the incorrect knock sensors for the vehicle. So the correct ones are both teed together and have a long pigtail that mount to the wiring harness under here. The ones that we have on the car now have no pigtails, so we, I guess, took two random plugs, plugged them in, and the harness is all routed all incorrectly, so we can't even plug the fans in and other stuff like that. So what I'm doing now is removing the intake manifold so I can change the knock sensors, orientating them correctly, torquing them to spec, and buttoning everything else up in the engine bay at the same time. So here we go.
So, last time you heard the 850 start, it was more of a cough than actual start. But since we identified our issue, it was time to pull the intake manifold off and swap out the knock sensors so that we can reroute the harness correctly. With the new knock sensors on and plugged in, we reinstalled the intake manifold and finished tidying up the rest of the engine bay, installing the ECU box, routing all the vacuum lines, and cleaning up all of our wiring. Corey did a really nice job hiding all the additional wires for the coilover plugs, variable valve timing, and VVIS intake control. I don't know, engine bay? Holy crap. What the? Wow. Looks like nothing happened. What? Where?
You're getting colder.
Am I getting colder?
Oh. Ooh.
Holy crap. That's insane, Corey. Wow.
That's cool, right?
That's really, that looks factory. We just got to run this into the car somewhere, right? I got the extender for this.
Well, you're going to need a mount for your laptop in the engine.
In the engine bay. Wow, Corey, that actually, that looks incredible. Wow, you can't see anything. That's amazing. After installing the cooling system, making a temporary air intake, replacing those purple engine covers with some clean black ones, and installing an itty bitty Odyssey racing battery, the engine was pretty much all buttoned up, and it was time to actually take this thing for a drive. works. It's a car. It drives. Feels pretty. You hear that idle? Runs good. Don't mind the exhaust. It's just dragging on the subframe. Grinding on it. After a quick rip up the parking lot with a completely uncorked exhaust, it was really refreshing to see the car running and driving after weeks and weeks of hard work. With the engine all buttoned up and running well on a base map, it was time to move on to the suspension and brakes before we can actually take this thing out on the road. BC Racing was kind enough to build us a set of coilovers for the 850. This will give us all the adjustment we need to really dial this thing in. We opted for a set of custom spring rates of 9 kg in the front and 5 kg in the rear. These rates will be a good starting point, and we can always refine and develop the car as we go. Once we got the front coilovers installed, along with some new Miley tie rod ends, it was time to move to the rear. The rear suspension of the 850 is not a true coilover setup with its separate shocks and springs. The BC Racing setup provides adjustable shocks and springs with an adjustable perch to dial in the ride height. As with any old car, there was a good amount of corrosion that we needed to clean up, so with a bit of wire brushing and some belt sanding, the new rear shocks went on. So here we are at the rear of the car. This is the infamous Delta Link rear suspension found on all front-wheel drive P80 Volvos. It's a very unusual suspension design, as you can see visually. It's very strange looking. The idea behind the Delta Link is that it allows for some degree of passive rear steer. So what I mean by passive rear steer is this isn't an active system that's able to steer the rear wheels according to driving scenarios. This is a passive rear steer. So basically, there are Delta links, which are these links, that attach to the Delta Link ends. And there's basically play or movement built into them where when you take a corner, it allows the rear wheels to change toe or steer themselves accordingly. We're going to refresh the rear end. Delta Link ends are a common failure point. They crack and they cause a lot more play and it makes the rear end feel really wonky. So we're going to refresh it with new Delta Link ends, new trailing arm bushings, and we're going to add a upgraded rear sway bar just to tighten everything up. The Delta Link rear end, I mean, the idea behind it was to help turn it, was to help make the car handle better. So we're going to test this out, see how it does on the track. If we find that it does weird stuff on the track and we don't like it, we can possibly come up with a solution to lock down that passive rear steer and make it fixed. But I'm willing to experiment. Volvo intended for it to be this way for a reason, and we're going to test that out. So we're going to change everything under here and be good to go. Everything will be freshed up just like the front end. First up was replacing the old trailing arm bushings and inserting the upgraded rear sway bar. It was clear that these bushings had never been replaced, and of course, we had some really stubborn and corroded bolts fighting us along the way.
Right on.
With the new trailing arm bushings and sway bar installed, it was time to replace the Delta Link ends. To get the Delta Link ends off, or the trailing arm links rather, these are pressed in. So Volvo made a special tool to pull them out, and that's what we've got here. It's probably possible to do this without it, but this is going to save you a lot of time pulling these out. So we'll go ahead and do that and get these out and be able to pop the new ones in. Okay. Then there's a hole here. Line up with the.
Yeah, that pin goes in.
Then you screw that one on the hole on the top.
And then you go rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat.
Yep.
That's what the instructions say, word for word.
Yeah.
How many rat-a-tats does it take to get to the sign?
Using the special Volvo tool, the old, crusty Delta Link ends were reluctantly released from their home. And, after cleaning more corrosion, we gently massage the new ones into place. It's closer than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby.
I think that's all that's gonna
That's
go in.
all it's in.
That's all it's gonna go in. With the suspension complete, it was time to move on to chassis stiffening. If you remember, the C70 convertible subframe came with a center brace installed. Unfortunately, the riv nuts had actually popped out of that brace and needed to be welded back in. Corey grabbed the welder, welded the riv nuts back in, and we reinstalled the brace. But that wasn't it. There was one final piece to tie it all together: the C70 convertible center brace. This brace replaces the rear subframe brackets with an entire section that connects it to the middle of the car. With that famous photo of the BTCC estate car up on two wheels in my mind, we wanted this chassis to be as stiff as we could possibly make it. So these are this is the actual factory Volvo strut tower brace, and as you can see there, sticker of authenticity, made in Sweden. So this is a super lightweight but strong strut tower bar, and that will complete our, other than a roll cage, our structural rigidity, everything. All right, sweet. Look, there's even instructions. Look at that, in Swedish, of all things. So, it's in Swedish. Las ignam texten unandu paberjar. Okay. I think this will be a pretty straightforward install. So, let's get right to it. Now on to the brakes. Originally, we planned to use the V70R Brembo brakes on the front of the 850. After test fitting the caliper brackets, calipers, and rotors on a spare 850 knuckle, we found that the adapters we had were less than ideal. The origin of these adapters were completely unknown, and the quality was questionable to say the least. You can see the caliper sits way too far outward from the rotor, so much so that the pads actually overhang from the rotor. With that little pad material actually grabbing the rotor, there was no point to run this setup the way it was. We plan to design new adapters ourselves in the future, but for now we needed a plan B. Plan B was to upgrade our 280mm brakes to 302s from a P80 V70R. The 302mm setup is a very common upgrade and known to be quite capable with proper track pads and fluid. Lucky for me, we had a complete kit on our site to upgrade to this setup, so Plan B immediately turned into Plan A. The 302mm setup uses a different caliper bracket to accommodate the larger rotors. We had a sticking brake caliper and decided to replace them with new ones and finished it all off with a set of stainless steel brake hoses. Before we actually take this car to the track, we're going to refresh the rear brakes and swap out the pads and fluid for one suited to the track. With the engine bay, suspension, and brakes sorted, it was time to address some of the issues with the exterior. First was to replace those awful taillights with ones in much better shape. With the taillights installed and looking good, we pulled out those strange headlights and replaced them with proper 850 E-codes for that period-correct look. Finally, we topped it off with an 850R wing to add a bit more aggression to the rear of our estate. This thing's gonna put some massive downforce. Now, don't worry about the peeling paint, as we plan to wrap this car with a very special livery in the future. Before taking the 850 on the road, we quickly had an exhaust welded up for the time being until we build something much better. Truth be told, this is not the final iteration of the exhaust, but at least it'll be quiet enough that we can drive it around to dial in the tune on the street.
What do you think of the exhaust, Aaron?
It's very complex because, you know, the pipe goes in and then there's a pipe that goes out, but then it goes back in before it goes out. I'm assuming this has something to do with resonation. And the welds look pretty solid. The welds definitely better than I would do. There's a little crunch here. That's okay. Crunches happen. Could have been mandrel bent. But yeah, it looks pretty. I mean, I can't wait to see this car done. I love it.
Yeah.
Love 850s.
This is JDM.
Okay.
Well, originally. So this is called a twin loop muffler. A lot of Honda guys use it to try and make, you know, their raspy Hondas sound a little better,
A little deeper.
a little deeper, a little throatier, and not so loud.
Yeah.
Right? We have to pass sound at Lime Rock, and
Uh-huh.
Lime Rock's really strict when it comes to sound.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, it really quieted it down because before,
Oh,
when it was straight piped, it was outrageously loud. And all I did was add this muffler, and it's like a completely different sound.
yeah. Before when you hopped on, I think everybody in this whole industrial complex heard your car.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not passing sound to Lime Rock.
So now it's a little more mellow.
I love it.
I think
it looks so badass.
Yeah. Let's see how you'll hear how it sounds. I think it sounds pretty good.
We have a few speed bumps ahead and know the car has a long way to go, but we hope to get it sorted for the next episode of the 850 Project.